All right, I think that's sufficient, or should we do that for another 40 minutes?
That'd probably be better than our actual show.
All right, let's do a podcast here.
All right.
Welcome on to Hollinger and Duncan. Thanks to all you who are joining us on YouTube and on Twitter. It shall forever be Twitter in my heart. So we're going to do something that's a little bit of a ripoff of what Danny and I do, but we're going to actually make this a little bit more informal. We're going to do a 15 and 60 style attack here of the West, and we're just going to do just some small observations we had. We realize that this is, small sample size, 3-4 games for all these teams, but just some things that have stuck out to us, and whether they're going to continue or not. You want to know what we saw from the first week, so here's a chance to do that. I am going to start here, and I saw the New Orleans Pelicans in person last night, playing against the Warriors, who we'll talk about later. But they're just out of bodies right now, John. I mean, 3 of their top 5, possibly 6 guys are hurt now. Herb Jones hurt his right shoulder in this game. We'll see how bad that is. But I'm guessing if he had to leave the game with a shoulder injury, he's not going to be back tonight. Mm-hmm. Trey Murphy's out with the hamstring injury, and DeJounte Murray has a broken hand. And Murphy, I don't think will be back for another 2 weeks. Murray's going to be 4 to 6. So they and then they traded away Najee Marshall or let Najee Marshall go due to money, and they traded away Dyson Daniels. So essentially, they are out of bodies, and it's just Zion and Ingram and guys right now.
Mm-hmm. Lot of 2-point shots going on there too, right?
Ooh, yeah. Pell's Twitter was melting down about that last and perhaps justifiably so. Yeah. So I mean, are they just not going to be able to win games over the next until Murphy and Murray come back?
They should have enough talent to at least stay afloat, right? You got it. Yeah. I mean, Zion Williamson and Brandon Ingram are active, right? Like, if you can't win half your games with those two on the court, it doesn't matter if me and you or 2 of the other 3 players. Then what are we doing here with that combination? You have to go to something else, right? So I think it's sort of a test for the whole idea of what the Pelicans are. Can they be good enough with a Zion Ingram nucleus? I think they think the answer is no, and that's why they haven't extended Ingram. They're trying to get to something else.
It was notable last night after a very nice start for Ingram that the Warriors kind of played Zion and Ingram relatively one-on-one, although they did force a bunch of turnovers. They're a really good turnover-forcing team, but that they weren't able to necessarily generate threes. They did a better job of that against Portland, but then they got blown out by Portland in their second night of the set there. And I'm more concerned about the defense. I mean, the offense should be okay. Like, they've got Zion and Ingram, and they've got shooters, and their centers are not very good. But Misi has shown a little bit, but he's a rookie. But you should be able to score okay. But they also are putting out these lineups at times where it's like Zion, Yves Misi, and Javonte Green together. So that's some pretty rough spacing. And then they don't really have any size and athleticism on the other end either. So you have Zion and Ingram. I mean, are those 2 of is Zion even a top 20 player in his current iteration? Maybe. Ingram, maybe is he a top 30, but then you have nothing else around them. You
have to bank on the idea that Zion, the healthy version of Zion, is a top 20 player. Or again, what are we doing here, right?
Sure.
It's been a slow start for him, though.
Yeah, he's real. Last night he actually was good, but he still wasn't getting a ton of shots. His touch is actually awesome, but it's really more like 6-footers than dunks and layups right now. And if you have the Warriors don't have a ton of size. If you have more size at the rim, I think that can cause them problems like we saw in Portland. Both those games he shot pretty poorly. Klingon, actually, I thought caused him some problems. So, okay, that is it on the New Orleans Pelicans. Your first team is?
The Oklahoma City Thunder, who are awesome on defense as we expected and playing fast as we expected. And our 23rd in offense? It's only 3 games.
As we expected. Oh, wait. Sorry. Am I allowed to say that?
I mean, the one thing we've talked about, Chet Holmgren's been really good, and yet you still wonder if they need another dude for the postseason. And
and they're shooting terribly from 3 right now, as are their opponents. But so elaborate on that.
Because I think Jalen Williams is such a key player for them, because if he can't thrive in a high usage role, we'll see. It's been 3 games. I don't want to overreact, but at the same time, they need more than what he's given them so far if they want to get, again, we're holding the bar very high for this team, right?
Oh, of course, yeah.
And so to be a team that can win a playoff series in May against Dallas, I think that's the question we're asking of these guys. I think they need a better version of Jalen Williams to do that, or they just need more guys, right? They're leaning a lot on some of these secondary players right now, who aren't giving them that. You look at what Cason Wallace is doing. Ousmane Dieng's playing a lot. AJ Mitchell's been in the rotation on a 2-way second rounder. I think Lou Dort, we're seeing his kind of limitations a little more again now that we have the bar as high as we do for this team. Wiggins is probably the one guy who's been kind of surprisingly effective so far. And so you still wonder if they need one more deal, one more move to get offensively to the place they need to be to, again, be that team that can beat Dallas in a conference finals, can hang with Boston in an NBA finals.
Yeah, well, they're forcing turnovers like crazy. They still have a plus 17.9 net rating, and they throttled Denver on the road. Denver is in it right now, but that's still a nice win. So I think that's we'll keep an eye on that for sure. And they're shooting 28% from 3. Now, is that something where they're not going to shoot whatever it was, 38% like they did last year? Like, there were a lot of guys who made some real improvements. Yeah, I think that is possible. And we also got to see how Hartenstein changes things for them as well. But
absolutely,
right now, opponents are shooting 48% at the rim against OKC. So,
yeah,
if opponents are going to shoot 48% at the rim all season against them, you're going to have some problems. And, they have a 92 defensive rating right now. And shooting 28% from 3 and having a league average offense is actually pretty good. So, all right, my next team, I teased it already. Let's get to Golden State. And apropos that the Warriors come up right after the Thunder because they acquired Lindy Waters III for free last offseason. And I was a big proponent of his going back to when he was a 2-way free agent after the 23 season. They brought him back in a 2-way. Finally, he got converted to the $8 million non-guaranteed years minimum salary special off of the 2-way, and then they didn't have roster spot for him, so Golden State picked him up. And so he was fantastic last night, had over 20 points. But the Warriors have 13 players when they're all healthy, and Melton is hurt, Wiggins is hurt. Hopefully they'll be back. Steph is probably going to miss a couple weeks with this ankle injury.
Peyton isn't hurt yet, but check back in 10 minutes, right?
Yeah. So it is good to have this depth, and I thought last night was a good test for their formula without Curry going against like we talked about with a team that has a lot of talent, but also is very limited in terms of depth, that they were able to overwhelm them with just shooting and offensive execution and then forcing turnovers defensively. But I want to ask you more from a front office perspective, just what do you do when you have 12 or 13 guys like this? Is that, how are you approaching that? Are you just like, all right, well, we got these guys. Are they looking to make a trade? What does it mean to have a team like this? Because it's pretty rare that this much talent will be assembled.
Yeah,
depth-wise.
Steve Kerr is a full bench coach, fortunately. I think it's a bigger problem if you have somebody like Thibs who only wants to play 7 guys. But inevitably, the way the game works, you really only need 9 most of the time. You can play 12, but you inevitably run into problems. I think they're already tripping over themselves a little bit with how to use Kyle Anderson, even though he's a really good player. So I think one of two things happens, right? Either you get enough injuries that it stops being a problem, or it still becomes, or if everyone's healthy, it's almost a bigger problem, because then you have people who know they're good enough to play and aren't, and they're unhappy, and there are contracts involved and stuff. I think at some point you're probably looking at a consolidation trade if you're Golden State. That's the thing you want to do. I mean, obviously, this is the thing they've been trying to do, right? They're trying to package multiple guys.
How many consolidation trades have there ever been, right? Like in fantasy football, you can do that. It's hard to do it in the NBA when stars are so important.
Randall and DiVincenzo, right? That was one they probably shouldn't have made, but we digress.
And by the way, did you notice that Jonathan Kuminga was benched?
Benched.
Did you see that amazing graphic? It was from Sean's ESPN social media really went crazy. It's like this massive graphic of him, and it says that he's being benched. Like, he's just being taken out of the starting lineup. Like, he's not. Yeah. First of all, like, benched to me means like you're just not gonna play.
Exactly.
As opposed to being taken to the bench. Yeah. But then, because like when they say start, sit, bench, like, or maybe it's start, bench, sit, I don't know, I can't remember. But in any event, it was being treated like this is the biggest benching in Bay Area sports since like Joe Montana. It's like, no, he's still gonna play 30 minutes. But I mean, do you think do you sense that there's something fraught about that situation?
The only thing that surprised me a little, I didn't know if they would bench. I say it now. If they would move Trace Jackson Davis to the second unit, because he's sort of a commemorative starter at this point, right? Where he's playing 10 to 15 minutes.
Yeah, Looney is back, actually. He's in much better shape, and he's playing like the guy you expected him to be last year, when I think he just let himself go, which is surprising for a guy with his reputation, but he just was not he physically just was not able to really compete that well. But he still has some limitations too.
Yeah, definitely. And I just don't know if they can go forward with Draymond at 4 and TJD at 5. I just don't know if there's enough offense, no matter who's at the 1, 2, 3, if you're going to line up that way.
Well, I think Steve and Draymond just don't want to go to that like this early in the season. But I mean, that's the problem for Kuminga, is that Draymond Green is there. Like, his career hasn't unfolded the way you would expect for a lottery pick with his talent and scoring ability. I'm not saying that they should have been playing him more necessarily. Draymond Green is better than him, or at least has been. So, but the big problem is, like, Draymond Green is a 4. Like, you can play him at the 5 some. That's actually not working as well now, because he can't really rebound anymore. Like, that's kind of a problem. He can't really get off the ground to get a rebound. So, like, that's not as powerful as it was in the past. Maybe, so you got to put a lot of length around Draymond Green at center, which they can do now this year. But I think they other than at the end of halves, they don't really want to go to that right now, which I understand.
Yeah. Who is the greatest shooter of all time, Buddy Hield or Steph Curry?
All right. Let's move on here. 4 minutes on the clock for your next team, which is?
I'm going to talk about the Dallas Mavericks, who I saw last night. An impressive win over Minnesota. I was at the game. Second half especially definitely had a playoff feel. Great plays, lots of intensity. My question about Dallas, will anyone other than Luka shoot a free throw for Dallas this year? Do you realize
Derek Lively?
They are 29th in free throw rate.
That's especially, and there have been a lot of free throws.
There have been plenty.
As you wrote about and I've been complaining about.
Plenty have been awarded this year. Luka is getting his share. Nobody else on Dallas is getting jack. Yeah, even Kyrie. It's been a lot of pull-ups.
He's never been a big free throw guy.
Never been a big free throw guy, but even last night he would get Randall on switches and he was pull up.
Well, and he killed him though, right?
I mean, Kyrie was great. Don't get me wrong. I mean, Kyrie has the skill to, he could shoot left-handed one game and still be efficient, right? Like he just has that ability. But over the course of 82 games, I think you want to see him at the rim more. There's another player we'll talk about who I think also falls under this heading. And it's exacerbated on Dallas because nobody else is generating any free throw. I mean, Clay, is never getting to the line.
That's true.
PJ Washington has 2 free throw attempts this year. Their backups are all catch and shoot role players, and even Gafford and Lively haven't been at the line that much. You'd think they'd get there a little more eventually.
Well, can I ask you a question about last night? Aside from that issue, I think other than the Phoenix game, Dallas played pretty well.
Dallas looks good overall. No doubt about it. Yeah.
Well, so what are your early thoughts on the Clay experiment there, having seen them last night?
Yeah, it wasn't a big Clay game, but at the same time, like he gives him something because he's such a threat, and Luka's always going to find him. I will say, I thought Grimes, he hasn't made as many shots yet, but I think he's going to be a real factor for them too. Like
he kind of looks like Josh Green from a distance when I was watching in the media room, so I'm like far away from the TV, and like they throw it to this guy, and I'm like, whoa, he shot that fast. That was amazing. And I was like, oh wait, no, that's Quentin Grimes. Josh Green is now a Hornet.
Yeah, little bit of a difference there.
Well, I did think it was interesting that they put Clay on Anthony Edwards some at the end of the game. And, I thought that was, like, okay enough. Because the matchups right at the start are a little weird, right? Like, I think they were going with the center on Randall and then, putting, like, Gobert, one of the, like, Luka's, like, guarding, like, Gobert, or he's guarding Mike Conley. And then, who is Clay going to guard? Like, when you have Luka, Kyrie, and Clay all out there starting, they had to put PJ Washington on Anthony Edwards. He's probably a little slow for that. Edwards went off in the first quarter in that matchup. So I do think that, like, if it were me, I would be kind of toggling PJ and Najee Marshall game to game, depending on what sort of player you need to guard with the starting lineup. But that was a pretty clunky to me. And the other team has a star guard, and they don't want to put Kyrie on him at the start of the game or Clay. It's like, what are you going to do?
That's the one thing heading into this season without Derrick Jones Jr. They don't have that guy who can be a wing stopper against elite players. I think even
Marshall could be that. I think Marshall.
You think he has the mobility to pull that off? I've always thought of him as more like a 3.5.
All right, actually, can you turn your volume down a little bit? Either your mic or on your computer. Let me make a note of this time for the edit. This is the beauty of the live YouTube, though. It will not be edited on YouTube. It will only be edited on the podcast.
How's that?
You're still reading out. Can you give me a little less? Is it possible that you're not on your mic on StreamYard? Is it possible you're on your computer mic or something?
I thought I set it to my. No, I'm definitely on that mic. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Say something really dumb and loud, and let me see if.
Dumb and loud.
Yeah, it's probably a little still too loud. Not very dumb, but definitely, but it is a little loud. So yeah, give me maybe like.
I moved the mic further away from me. How's that?
Yeah, that'll make it a little more echoey, but that's all right. We'll deal with it.
Okay.
Okay, this is hotel YouTubing life here. All right. Tyson says it sounds fine in the comments. All right, Tyson has not recorded a podcast for 10 years and become a snob about this stuff. Okay, let's get to actually another good transition. The Clippers, saw them in person against the Warriors. They handed the Warriors their only loss. Defense looks really good for them, I would say.
Right?
And they're getting good. Sorry.
I really like what I've seen from them. Like they've been much better than I expected so far. Just playing really hard, being real pains in the ass to play against, lots of good defenders, and then James Harden doing just enough at the offensive end. We'll see if it's sustainable over 82. I have a feeling it's probably not, at least not to the extent that you can make the top 8 in this Western Conference. But yeah, just a feisty team that you will not enjoy playing against.
No, I agree on that. It is the Warriors are not the greatest offensive team, but they also played Denver and played them pretty well. Zubats looks like he's having a monster year so far. Like, they're giving him the ball in the post, even like letting him be one of the primary offensive players on the second unit when Harden. So I think they really, what I thought they would really struggle with was the non-Harden minutes, and they won those handily against Golden State the other day by just like turning the Warriors over, getting out in transition. Derrick Jones Jr., I thought he was awesome in that game. He had like 4 tip dunks and like a crazy alley-oop from half court and forced a bunch of turnovers. So like that is going to be a very interesting subplot throughout this year of, did Dallas make the right call of thinking that Najee Marshall could just replace Derrick Jones Jr.? Because Jones Jr., it didn't seem like they were that far apart. Maybe he was expecting more from Dallas.
I got some intel on that. Like, I think as free agency started, he was expecting more, and Dallas couldn't get there. And so the way this game of musical chairs works, you have to act fast. So Dallas just grabbed Najee Marshall, and then Jones's number came down. That's my understanding of how things shook out.
I mean, Jones deserved more, in my opinion. Yeah. Like, I think he should have gotten the full mid-level for the player that would be. Yeah, so Serfdom says, or Serfdom is not cool, says that Norm Powell has been great. Yeah, that's been true, too. That was something that you and I both highlighted, actually, as a guy who at least would get more opportunity, if not necessarily play better on a per play basis. So,
well, he's taken advantage of it so far. I mean, he's been really good. You talked about the non-Harden minutes. I want to ask you how KPJ looked in the Golden State game, because when I watched him against Denver, it was like dueling sabotage between him and Westbrook. Like, it was.
No, he was bad, actually. Okay. So they actually tried to play him with Harden a little bit, I think, to just like make his life a little easier. But yeah, he does not look like anywhere close to the same guy that he was in Houston. And
he looks exactly like the same guy to me. Like, I didn't think he was a good player in Houston.
Well, yeah, but he at least was like able to do some stuff, right? Like, I think he had, he had a 50-point game for them, admittedly on a shitty tanking team, but like, he looked like he could come in and just score some points for you, Cam Thomas style or something like that. Like, although that might be too much shade on Cam Thomas the way he played early, but but I think it's going to be interesting. I want to see where the Clippers are in like a month or two, because I do think their defense is quite legitimate, and Ty Lue has them playing hard. And a good analog is that 22 season when Paul George missed half the year and they still managed to be around 500. It was a much different season, and I think there was less talent at that point.
Also reminiscent of their was it 2018 season, where I think they didn't have Kawhi or PG. It might have been the year before they came, where they still got to the playoffs and had like a 35-point comeback. The years all run together for me.
19 was that.
2019?
Yeah. The Lou Williams.
Yep.
Montrezl Harrell year. Yeah. Different coach at that point. That's the kind of team that Doc Rivers likes to coach. No pressure. Okay, you're up next here.
Sure. Let's talk about Minnesota, because I saw them last night too. And I think the interesting thing with them, Kevin O'Connor wrote about this today, Anthony Edwards and his shot locations, where he's taking so many shots from three. And he got hot at the beginning of the game last night and was raining from three. But historically, he's been better the closer he gets to the rim. And when you go through and look at his shot mix, this isn't just replacing long twos with threes, which is a trade you'd probably like for him to make. He's replacing rim attempts with threes, right? Like, he's got 9% of his shots, I think, from the rim this year. Only 4 games again, but a worrying trend if you're Minnesota. Like, you need Anthony Edwards to be at the cup.
Yeah, I think that is really concerning, and I was concerned about it in preseason when he came out. Danny and I just did like a test for NBA League Pass with this new software they're using, so we watched that game very closely, and it basically seemed like their entire ethos was, we're just going to take as many threes as possible. Like Dante DiVincenzo doing that, more on off-ball stuff, good. Anthony Edwards not even trying to get to the basket and just firing a three off the dribble. not good. Now, if he's trading long twos for that, sure. But as you noted, it's basically been rim moving back to three. They actually should have generally more spacing this year, I think, than they did in the past. I know they don't have Towns in the starting lineup, but so maybe that's a little bit part of it. But I think, like, there's so many possessions. Like, the number one advantage that Anthony Edwards has is he's bigger, stronger, and faster than whoever is guarding him in most circumstances. And so, too many possessions, he never attempts to use that advantage, right? All right, just give me one hard move, hard dribble, one hard rip through, make the defense deal with that. And then, hey, if they do cut you off, great. Now they're backpedaling and you can pull up. But there's too many times where it's just like, all right, I guess I can just shoot this semi-contested rather than just like, you have to make one hard move, make the defense react. There are too many plays where the defense he's not making the defense deal with it.
Yeah, gives him a little bit of a free pass. Again, Minnesota's a good team without a question. I think their top 8 is really solid. Clearly, like, look to me, even though they lost last night, they look to me like a top 4 team in the West. But we have a high bar for this team because of how much they won last year, a conference finalist trying to get to another level. The other thing you wonder about is they're turning the ball over a lot, even though they're shooting a bunch of threes. And is their overall guard play going to be at a high enough level? Mike Conley's been dealing with a problem with his wrist. He's 37. Little bit about 7 years. Like, look, I mean, Mike and I were there in Memphis and never saw him get his dribble picked like he got last night with Dinwiddie. Shocked me, that play. Yeah, just, you wonder a little bit about the backcourt. They don't really have a backup one right now. They haven't played Dillingham. We'll see what happens there.
So, 30 seconds left. How do you think the Randall thing's going so far there?
Probably about as well as you get back. The first game didn't go great, but I think since then, Julius has been really good. He's been a really good, actually, catalyst. Like, he's made up a little bit for some of their guard play. He's really good at finding guys at the three-point line, even though he himself is operating from the elbows more. So I think it's gone pretty well.
Yeah, I think so. Now defensively, it was interesting that they're willing to just switch him on to Kyrie. Tom Thibodeau, when he was in New York, would almost have him in a drop. And so, like, how are they going to deal with that? Would they go back to, like, doing more trapping on the ball with Julius Randle and try to fly around behind that when Gobert's in the game? Like, dealing with him defensively would be interesting, but it's not like, Karl Anthony Towns was going to be better in that perspective out on the floor. Maybe he would have been better as, like, a rim protector on the second unit, but I don't know. Okay, next one here for me is the Utah Jazz, and we got a comment on the Jazz here. Richard is he's a very positive guy here in the comments, but in this case he is correct. Jazz have a negative 17 point differential. Their coach benched their third best player to try to intentionally lose, pissing Sexton off. Keontae has been horrific, and Hendricks is off the year. I didn't know about the pissing Sexton off thing. The Hendricks injury really was just miserable, like to see him complete non-count. He didn't even jump, but that's that hopefully won't be a career changer, but it's certainly to lose a developmental year, to lose certainly the Utah Jazz now won't be going into next draft being like, all right, we have our solution at this position, we're not going to draft over this guy. So I was really hoping he could develop, but then the on-floor group, like, he was the best thing they had as far as like any kind of perimeter defender, and he was underqualified there. So now, Cody Williams is going to start. But then the other thing too, as Richard alluded to, is like, there's this game in Dallas. Colin Sexton is 9 for 11 from the field for 23 points, and he plays 28 minutes. So you can get 10 minutes for Patty Mills and 13 minutes for Bryce Sensabaugh, and Jordan Clarkson could play 27 minutes, going 3 for 11 from the field. Like, it's just a completely non-serious season in Dallas. Or, sorry, it was in Dallas that game, but in Utah.
They had 6 first or second year players, right, that they're trying to get minutes for, basically. And I'm worried that none of them are any good.
Well, certainly not right now.
Yeah.
They are, and this is I think they finally have enough young guys, regardless of whether they're good or not. They finally have enough young guys that even Will Hardy can't make chicken salad out of this.
Right. Because the formula the last 2 years was play a 50-game season and then punt so you can get the draft pick. I think they're not going to need to do that. I think they will not need to sweat keeping that top 10 protected pick this year.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I mean, I've said this before that they're 29.5 over under. That might be the worst line, at least in my opinion. I can certainly be wrong on this, obviously, by the end, but the worst line that I can ever remember seeing at the start of a year. And it wasn't even that I thought they were going to go that far under it, but there was just no way they were ever going to go over it. Like to lose that top 10 protected pick in this draft, it just was not going to happen. And then, Basketball Genesis says trade Lowry, and well, they can't because of the extension that he signed. They intentionally signed it on a date, August 7th, where he wouldn't be tradable for 6 months, and the trade deadline happens to be on February 6th. So that he cannot be traded this year, and I'm sure they would like to at least pretend to try to build around him next offseason. We'll see. I'm sure they'll explore both methods, see what draft pick they get, etc. But basically, they paid him a ton of extra money that they didn't need to this year in the renegotiation and extension to buy his silence about how much this is going to suck.
They are burning another year of his prime, and hopefully for his sake, next year they feel like they have enough that they can actually try to win for real. So we'll see how it goes.
Next team for you?
Next team for me. Let's talk about the Memphis Grizzlies.
Oh, man, I really want to. I know they lost to Chicago without Ja the other night, which I didn't see. But
Virginia graduate Jay Huff has taught this team how to win.
Then they forgot against the Bulls.
And then they forgot against the Bulls.
He went soft as soon as he got a standard NBA contract.
He got paid and just, sign and retire. Marcus Smart. I had other people in the league mention this to me, that he has not looked good performance-wise and has not looked good physically. And you just wonder now, he's 30. He's signed for another year beyond this one, right? And they need him to be one of their four guys, right? Along with Bane, Jaren, and Ja. They brought in Marcus Smart to be the fourth guy, and he hasn't been anywhere close to that.
No, he hasn't been, despite the fact that he was he was plus 14 in 25 minutes in their loss to the Bulls, despite being 0 for 11 from the field. Now, statistically, they were much better defensively when he was out there last year. But yeah, I mean, they need him to make shots, and when Vince Williams Jr. comes back, maybe they just move Smart to the bench. They started him at point guard actually last night, or their last game, I should say. That he certainly is underqualified offensively for that. I think that was one of the lessons of last year, is that just wasn't going to work. Which they kind of brought him in to almost be their backup point guard, but Scottie Pippen Jr. has been pretty good in that role so far. But overall, I mean, I think it's just been remarkable. Even if Smart hasn't been that great, I just love what they've gotten from some of these bench guys like Huff, and Santi Aldama is shooting the shit out of it.
Santi has been really good, and I think that's been, contract year for him, so they'll have another interesting decision to make. But he struggled last year, if we're being honest, and this has been a really pleasant thing to see that he's stepping back up. I think Jake LaRavia may turn out to be something in the league.
Okay.
They've gotten a lot.
What makes you say that?
I think he's good enough to play. I don't think he's amazing at any one thing, but he's pretty big. He can handle the ball. He shoots it okay. I think he's going to do enough that you can play him. And I don't know, don't hold the parade, but I don't know. It looked for a while there that it wasn't going real well. I think he's actually a real NBA player now.
So what do you think of this strategy of like John Morant? Even he was out with this thigh contusion, but like we're only going to play John Morant 27 minutes a game.
Interesting.
And Jaren and Bane, I don't think they've gotten anybody to 30 minutes in a game yet, I want to say.
Yeah, Bane's averaging 29. Jaren only played the 2 games so far, but actually I think Santi Aldama might have gone over 30 in one of them.
Yes, yeah, he was. Santi Aldama actually played 30. Yeah, they went a little harder in that Bulls game, but that was that an overtime? No, it wasn't.
It's interesting because I think the medical teams, one of the things they're working with is in the ramp up of the early part of the season when you have fewer preseason games and a lot of the good players aren't even playing them, is how do you get the car from 0 to 50 without the engine breaking down?
And I think particularly for this team that's so snake bitten, they also have 6 games and 9 nights to start the year. So I kind of like the strategy if they can tread water, which they have so far.
Yeah, I mean, I'm seeing sort of the alternate case in Atlanta where the Hawks are just running out of players right now, and we're only 4 games into the season.
Okay, yeah, we got lots more to talk about with Memphis. I think they're absolutely fast. I mean, the number one thing you can say, though, is that Ja looks like Ja. His jumper hasn't been there yet, but certainly he's been pretty dominating getting to the basket. Let's talk about the Lakers. This is my observation about them. I wanted to get your thoughts on.
Okay.
It was just an absolute celebration. JJ Redick, everything is different this year. We're 3-0. We've had 3 relatively close wins against admittedly very good teams. Then they have a close loss in Phoenix. But JJ Redick has changed everything about this team. Austin Reeves is so much better. Anthony Davis is so much better. Yes, he has been dominating. We're running everything through Anthony Davis. I think people are getting a little over their skis on this Lakers team. Even if Davis is going to play better, even if Reeves is going to play better, Russell hasn't been good so far. Like, yeah, that starting lineup has historically been pretty good, but they have nothing coming off their bench right now. And like those guys are not playing well, and it's been the starters who have kind of gotten them through it. LeBron also, I think we'll see. I'm not going to shovel dirt on him, obviously, but he's been doing it mostly with the jumper. Hasn't looked great finishing inside. I think he just it's been a long summer for him with the Olympics and stuff. So again, he probably will have moments where he's able to do a lot more inside the arc. But I'm just yes, I would probably go over on the Lakers 43.5, where I went under before slightly, but I would project them to win 2, 3, 4 more games. Not this is obviously a team that's winning in the low 50s based just on what we've seen so far. I think some people are really jumping out there at this point.
I have not changed my priors much on this team. 80's been tremendous, but to me, the highway still leads to the same place, right? Where they're basically counting on the same 4 or 5 players, only 2 of whom can really play at a star level, and then the bench isn't very good. You're bringing in Vincent, Christie, Hayes. I mean, Dalton Connect has given him something offensively at least. So it's hard for me to get super excited. I mean, it's week 1 of the season. Everyone wants to overreact and hold praise for themselves and whatever. But I can't get too crazy high. I think it still leads to the same place where they're a 6 or 7 seed. AD's been great though. Hats off to him.
Yeah, and I think they're a team that on any given night is going to compete against a good team and maybe could beat them. And I also wouldn't write them off completely in most playoff matchups. But I need to see them blow teams out. Now, they haven't played that many bad teams, obviously. The one thing I will say that Redick has helped is the offensive rebounding, which was just in the toilet last year. That's now mid-pack. But they are also still 27th in three-point attempt rate, as much as he was going to try to increase that, because they just don't really have great shooters coming off their bench now. If Reeves has looked better, that's maybe the biggest thing I've seen that would make me feel like I could be wrong. But also, remember, part of how they had that big stretch last year was D'Angelo Russell went completely crazy shooting threes, and we haven't seen that from him yet. So I'm not sure, and he's not a guy that I think is like, some dominating player who's necessarily going to get back to that level he was at the last 30 games or so of the season.
Yeah,
Next team for you.
To me, the Lakers don't get into the 50s without a trade.
Yes. Yeah, and we'll see. I still want to see where LeBron's at a couple of months from now, too. Next for you.
Can we talk about the Houston Rockets?
Lovely.
I might have to eat one here.
Okay.
I was really bullish on Amen Thompson coming into this season. Whew.
And so what have you seen that's disturbed you?
Not being guarded and still losing his dribble and passing the ball to the other team and kind of sabotaging the offense when he's in the game for Van Vliet. I don't know if they can keep having him be at the one with the second group. Like they might just have to put in Shepherd. Like I don't know. Like
who played 3 minutes bad in their last game.
Yeah, and it's tough. I mean, they have a lot of guys right now. It's tough for everyone to get, and we're seeing this with everyone in the rookie class basically, where it's not a great class, and it's been tough for these guys to get on the floor. But I've been really disappointed in Thompson. I had the bar too high, I think, to begin with, but that's something where they may have to change roles or look at some different things if it doesn't start changing direction pretty soon.
Yeah, the big thing that stuck out to me on them is it's just, and why I thought that their season might just be kind of a weird season, is they just have a lot of priorities and a lot of mouths to feed. Like, I think, maybe if Amen Thompson were in a little bit different of a role where everything on the second unit was set up for him to run it. Maybe either he runs pick and roll with Steven Adams, who then just bludgeons into his own man on a Gortat screen, and Ben can go to the basket and lay it in, and everyone else is a great shooter. Maybe that could work, right? But they also, all right, they're going to play Tari Eason and Cam Whitmore with that unit. And then, all right, they'll probably play Shepherd too, but Shepherd also needs his on-ball reps, or he's not playing. And then a lot of Thompson, he's playing next to Şengün. That's a really tough fit as well. Like, they're just going to put their center on Thompson. Like, that's kind of difficult to deal with. So you need him to not be guarded by the center. You need him to be able to kind of play a conventional pick and roll. And then, well, all right, if you're going to switch a big onto him, like, does he have the skill level to beat that guy necessarily? Because his jumper is a little questionable. So I think there's some things about him I really like. Ben Simmons has been often a comparison to him, and I do think Thompson's defense and his finishing around the basket, offensive rebounding, like making hustle plays, like that's all real. But there hasn't been quite enough development as an on-ball guy, and it's just like, how many reps is he really going to get as like a true backup point guard? Yeah. With this group, with the spacing that he would require, so that it's Shepherd is kind of running into the same thing. What do you thought of Jalen Green's start?
Very, very encouraging. It's mostly built on 3-point shooting right now, so we'll see if that holds up. Obviously, if that's just variance or if that's something more legitimate than that. I mean, he was on fire against San Antonio, especially in that first half, and so encouraging, right? So hopefully Phoenix looks at that and says, yes, he can be the salary match for Devin Booker.
Well, I will say this, like, he's certainly playing at a level that makes you think that wasn't like some crazy extension. I know both of you and I like that. Others weren't that into it. He is still reliant on making his threes, but he was taking a ton of them, 7 of 13 against San Antonio. Now, I think one thing that'll be very interesting is just what happens when the defense starts reacting to him at the 3-point line. Now, that's a good problem to have, right? Like that He's actually shooting it well, because every team that they've played so far has just played their center in a deep drop, so they just set a screen for him and he can just shoot a three. Like, that option has just been available to him every single time. And so what happens when they start getting a little more complex? But at least forcing the defense to react to you instead of just like, oh yeah, go ahead, bomb away whenever you want to, is nice. I think he's looked pretty good getting to the basket. He's gotten a little stronger. Like, defense has been fine. So certainly a very encouraging start for him, but we'll see whether the ball keeps going in. But he's certainly shooting it at a volume that makes everyone around the team seems to think that it's going to be going in. The Phoenix Suns.
Yeah.
I'm encouraged that their 3-point attempt rate is up. It is 8th this year. Like that is a little bit of an improvement. They had a nice win against Dallas on the second night of a back-to-back. Maybe should have beaten the Lakers in LA, and then they did beat them at home. The center thing, I'm not loving that. Like we saw a lot of Plumlee in that game against the Lakers. I guess they felt like they needed someone to guard AD. I also thought it was noteworthy in that game that they closed it without a point guard. First time that they've done that. I actually think that is their best closing group.
Yeah.
Jusuf Nurkic not having a great start to the season. Like he was a big regression candidate for me, both just from health and performance so far. But also like Plumlee isn't good enough to be closing games for a really good team. And, Booker and KD have kind of only been okay. Like they haven't dominated. And then the other thing that really stuck out to me is just at the end of games, like the Clippers game, Bradley Beal just like didn't touch he was having the best game of any of those guys, and he just didn't touch the ball for 5 minutes, and they finally gave it to him. They ended up winning because that's actually one thing that he's looked pretty decent. He missed a game with an elbow injury, and he's also looked okay as like their primary defender on guards at the end of games, which they need him to be. So this is a team too that like I haven't really seen like the Bud effect for these guys. I think it's been more about just they have a few more NBA players than they've had in the past.
I can't believe you just talked about the Phoenix Suns for that long without mentioning Ryan Dunn of the University of Virginia.
I left it for you.
Who is leading the team in 3-point rate after he wouldn't even look at the rim at Virginia.
Yeah.
Like he
wrote about that.
He set an ACC record for record scratches. I'm convinced of this. And now he's bombing away. He's at 44% right now. We'll see if it holds up. But that's been a fantastic development because he is a really, even right now, very good defender at 3-4. He's switchable. He makes it more plausible for them to play closing lineups with KD at 5, maybe. The one thing you talk about, the Bud effect, increasing 3-pointers. One of the ways they're doing that is by having Jusuf Nurkic take threes that the other defense doesn't give a shit about. And so You can't just press a button and make him Brook Lopez. And so
I know, but Bud pressed a button and made Brook Lopez Brook Lopez. So.
Fair enough. Well,
but Lopez is a guy who always had more general touch than Nurkic.
Yeah.
Sure. I know what you mean.
Well, if you could press a button and turn Ryan Dunn into Brook Lopez, I guess that's not so bad either.
Yeah. But I had like. But it's not necessarily. I think people underrated his malleability because he wouldn't change that much in the playoffs. But I think just in terms of like, here's what our system is going to be coming into the season. Like he is malleable that way. Like his Hawks teams were very aggressive defensively. Obviously, the Bucks perfected that deep drop and just winning the math battle by totally walling off the rim. So I don't think that it's like, oh well, he can't do the exact Milwaukee things. But I just haven't seen a ton of like playing super smart yet. Like I think Phoenix is just, it's more about kind of the talent that they have on the floor right now, just being better. And, you're not going to give 1,500 minutes to Josh Okogie or whomever this year, or Keita Bates, Diop, or any of these other flotsam that they're throwing out there at the 4. Next
or
team
at the
for you.
1 for that matter.
Yes.
Denver Nuggets.
Oof.
So coming into the year, I was worried that next summer they were going to have to give up 2 seconds to get off Saric's money, and now I think it might be 3 seconds.
Oof. He's rather groundbound.
It's been a rough go for everyone except Jokić. Jokić has been amazing, as always. You'd probably say either he or AD is the MVP right now. Maybe Jason Tatum, right, would be the other guy. But hasn't looked that great around them. I wonder if they just have too much of a math problem with how they're structured offensively. They're last in 3-point rate again. And there's just a limit in today's NBA, I think, of how much you're realistically going to score if you're not going to generate more threes. Their best hope for kind of increasing that is Strother, who, man, teams are just going at him every single play as soon as he checks in. And so that needs some work. Westbrook was like hilariously bad in the Clipper game. Now he's played better the last two.
He might have won them that Nets game. He was great in that. I mean, he didn't close, but he kind of got them back into it. He had 22 points. Hit a few jumpers, but he also got to the foul line and actually made all of his free throws too.
And then the thing people in the league are talking about is the tension between Malone and Calvin Booth over, what that roster is and what it's been allowed to become in the 2 years since they won.
Elaborate on that a little bit. So the people in the league are talking about it. I mean, this, and obviously you don't get into specifics of names, but it's like, is that, do you think ultimately coming from Michael Malone has told people this, or like people in the organization, like what is the genesis of that?
I think the genesis of that starts with Malone being unhappy with where the roster is, and I think that's just spread from there.
He's made even some public comments that indicate
but that. I mean, coaches all talk to each other, and that's where a lot of this comes from. But at the same, like Jamal Murray just hasn't looked like that guy yet. I'm looking at the stats, and actually every single player except Jokić has a negative BPM this season. That's a little scary. I don't know if that's a totally accurate reflection of Christian Brown's actually been pretty decent. Aaron Gordon, I think, has been Aaron Gordon, but Porter certainly
I
hasn't
would disagree
well.
with that, actually. I think Gordon to me has looked slower on the perimeter, right? Like he was getting blown by Cam Thomas last night a few times. He was getting called up by Shea, and Shea was blown by him as well. And he hasn't had quite that same explosion, I'd say, around the rim, and perhaps understandable because he had just such a tragic offseason with the death of his brother that basketball might not have been top of mind for him, which I understand. But as far as just watching him on the court, we got to be honest with what we see. So I've kind of seen that. I do. Can I give you some Nuggets stats? These are fucking wild.
Okay.
Would you care to guess the Denver Nuggets, after 4 games, their on-off differential between Nikola Jokić on the floor and off?
I'm going to say it's 20 points or something per 100.
No, that would be a normal year, John. The answer is 46.9. Nikola Jokić has played 156 minutes. He has been off the court for only 46 minutes. They have a 121.1 offensive rating with him on the floor and a 74.2 offensive rating without Jokić. That is a 46.9 differential.
I had such hope for that Westbrook-Saric two-man game,
I thought it could actually be give a little bit higher of a floor. Now, interestingly enough, too, and I would say this is shown out to me, the defense has not been very good. They're only a plus 3.6, excuse me, with Jokić on the floor because the defense hasn't been very good. And actually, that bench defense has been pretty solid. But those bench numbers, with Jokić off the floor, they're a negative 27.8 net rating because their defense is a 102 with Jokić off the floor. I mean, again, only 46 minutes. I realize that, but it just this is a rather stark difference.
Yeah. Just trying to play a scoreless tie until Jokić comes back in, basically.
All right, the San Antonio Spurs. The one thing that I've been looking at for them, and I didn't get into it more granularly, but when I just look at the box score, I look at the box scores for every game that happens around the league. And every single time I notice, wow, an opponent is shooting really bad from 2. And I'm that is obviously the Victor effect, right? That shows that their defense is going to be pretty good. Comme ça. There's a opponent 2-point percentage is really bad, but they are only 17th in location field goal percentage And that is because opponents are shooting just like absolutely horrendously on mid-rangers and floaters, like basically worse in the league, like 30s, even in the 20s. And I think they've only played 3 games as well. But their rim protection numbers are pretty decent when Victor, and particularly Victor contesting. Like he definitely is really affecting teams' offenses quite a bit. And then, of course, when he goes out there, it's a parade to the rim once again. Again, also, I think part of that is that they've been playing Victor pretty much exclusively in like a very extreme drop. He certainly has the versatility to do more, but they've just been having him like stand in the paint on all these pick and rolls. Maybe that changes as they go against teams that aren't the Houston Rockets.
Yeah, I was going to say they played Houston twice. So how much is this is just we're looking at Houston stats?
Yeah, although Greg Popovich, especially this more modern version of him, I don't know how much he's really like changing his defense to account for the opponent with a young team from game to game. Any Spurs thoughts that you had here?
I still just don't think the rest of the roster is very good. I'm somewhat encouraged by Castle, but he has to shoot to really make it. Sohan, I would say, is off to a nice start. Doing more offensively. It's still like all around the rim, but that's fine because Victor's going to be out on the perimeter. Can they get Devin Vassell on the court? It's hard for me to get that excited about what this team is right now, though. I think most of these guys aren't really good enough to carry forward with Victor.
No, I think that's right. I mean, Chris Paul is not really able to do anything inside the arc as well either. Like he'll throw a few nice passes with guys like slipping out of a pick and roll or when the defense overreacts. And we haven't seen that much of the like Chris Paul diming up Wemby for alley-oop game yet. Wembanyama's had one really awesome game and 2 like real kind of struggle sessions. There are a few times where I've just been like really still annoyed by his shot selection, even though he's supposedly working around the basket. I will say this actually, Jeremy Sohan has had some intriguing moments as a finisher inside, like almost looking like Sean Marion-esque. Like that he had one play where he caught the ball on the baseline and just like shouldered Alperen Şengün out of the way and just dunked on him with 2 hands. Like he's been like popping off the ground, almost looking like a little Aaron Gordon-y, I would say.
Yeah.
We'll see how his individual defense comes along and also obviously his ability to shoot, but he does have some passing skill as well. So, maybe there is sort of a, like he could be the Gordon to Wembanyama's Jokić at some point in time. I mean, that's not ideal. I still want Wembanyama to have more spacing so he can be the roll guy or ducking in or whatever, or driving to the basket off a pick and roll and getting the ball in the short roll. But like Sohan is showing something athletically. I think he's kind of struggled with injuries his first couple of years. I think he had a really good summer physically. He's looking good.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
All right, who else we got? You got one more? Is that right?
Yeah, I got Portland, and I think the key takeaway for Portland is proof of concept that this can be a solid defensive team. And offensively, they don't have a number one guy, and so guys like Simons, Grant, even Ayton, they're all Abdia, like they're all going to end up trying to do too much, like beyond their skill set a little bit, and that's going to hurt them. But there's no reason for this not to be at least an average defensive team up until the point where they start tanking more blatantly. I mean, when you look at the size they have with like Ayton and Klingon and Williams when he comes in, they're starting Toumani Camara, who's a good defender. You got size with Grant and Avdia. Like Avdia's a really good defensive player. So even though you're playing Simons at the one who's kind of small and not that good defensive, like they have enough size, length, whatever, up and down the lineup that they could be a problem at the defensive end, and that can keep them in games. So I'd say that's the most positive takeaway for them.
Yeah, and I thought they actually could. And they were quietly 23rd in defense last year, which, given how tanktastic their season was, that's actually like not
right.
terrible.
Yeah.
But Corey's been disappointed with Denny Avdia. His finishing and he notes that he is shooting 29% from the field.
Yeah, rough side. I mean, it's 4 games. I don't want to panic too much yet. He was really good in Washington when he could attack off the dribble and get his shoulder into a guy, and he's pretty strong and powerful. But I just wonder, with Ayton and Grant there, I think Avdija is having to play more of like a guard spot as opposed to a 4. Maybe we'll see. I mean, it's 4 games, so I don't want to overreact too much to that. What have you thought of Scoot so far?
Well, I watched the one Portland game that I watched was I thought the best game of his career. The overtime game that they lost, or sorry, not overtime. At the very end, they lost to New Orleans, but it was the first time that I had seen him like really causing problems for the defense schematically, where they would bring a screener up. He was so quick, he would reject the screen, get into the lane, and make the right decision. I think he was 7 of 9 from the field. Didn't shoot that many jumpers, except when they just completely backed off him. They tried to deal with him and pick and roll that way, and so he just hit a wide open 3 from the top of the key. Like, I think his handle looks better. He looks much better athletically. Like, he's just getting separation, and so like that was a very encouraging game for me. I think the stats on his other 2 games have been pretty terrible from a shooting perspective, but just the way he looked getting to the basket in that game, like it was enough for me to be like, oh yeah, like I understand why I thought this guy had all-star potential. We really didn't see that last year, just in terms of like the physical domination. I've liked him defensively too. Like, he's just strong. He's got long arms. He competes pretty well. Like, I think he can end up being a pretty big plus there. Maybe even someone who can switch some defensively as well. So I at least to see that flash was nice. Now, if he doesn't do anything for the next 5 games, I'll have to probably write that off. But it was just to because there were so few plays where you were like wowed by him. Yeah. And in that game, I was like, oh, he's actually popping off the screen here. Like, this is the guy that I wanted to see. Yeah, go ahead.
I watched them against Golden State, and I thought Scoot had one of the worst 20-point games I've ever seen. Where like the finishing was pretty tragic, and defensively he was just really bad.
Well, is it tragic in a way where it's like he shouldn't be taking these? He's never going to get these off, or was it like, all right, he's getting like a decent look, like a decent shot window, but it's just not going in because his touch isn't developed enough yet?
To me, it wasn't a touch issue. It was the attempt he ended up with, the opportunity he started with, and the attempt he ended up with. Where you watch the play and like, okay, a good NBA guard is just going to turn that into a left-handed layup, and he just turns it into this crazy thing where he tries to like broad jump and ends up trying to finish around a guy who's 6 inches taller than him, but he hasn't really taken off vertically off the ground, and it's just all wrong,
Yeah.
And we've seen that so much over the last couple of years. But I want to, again, this is kind of quick impression, short attention span theater. Like there's an 82 game season for a reason. We'll see, more games, how he develops and everything, and where this goes.
Sacramento will be our last team, and I think just their shooting guard roulette has kind of been interesting. Kevin Huerter was a surprise start at the beginning of the year. I had been very encouraged by actually the one time I saw Keon Ellis in person in the preseason that he was shooting more, but I felt like his role was so obvious in the starting lineup that they needed someone to guard the ball. Maybe they just weren't happy with him in that role, so they felt like they needed a little more size with Huerter, and just generally like maybe they're going to lose him if they don't start him, because that's kind of what happened last year. But he's also coming back from the shoulder. So like the Kings, they blew out Utah last night. Utah's a complete joke. They blew out Portland, and then they had 2 close losses to good teams. Have you had any thoughts on them early on?
I just don't know what happens with the front court depth. Like, unless Sabonis is going to play 82 times 40, when you're coming in with Lyles and Len as your depth, like, Yikes. I just at some
those
point
guys have been okay in the past. I think it's more about the lack of like any kind of length or athleticism on the wing is my bigger concern for them.
well, or any rim protection. Like somehow they're sixth in defense right now, but again, they played Utah and Portland, so maybe that doesn't hold up.
Yeah,
And-
that's its own defense.
But that's where you worry about this team. That's where I wonder if they end up falling a little short in this Western Conference. Like even though like the Kings are a pretty good team, right? But they're an Eastern Conference playoff team. Would you say? I just don't know if they have enough size, depth to get in that top 8 in the West.
Well, the thing I will say about them is their top 4 guys are all pretty bulletproof. Fox, Sabonis, Murray, and DeRozan, are not guys who really have gotten hurt very much. So
Well,
that's
they
right.
better be.
Murray, yeah. Well, exactly. Yeah, but that's been I think a way that the Kings have overachieved the last 2 years. Now, like just with DeRozan, it's just different now than it was 2 years ago, and I think we're seeing this a little bit in Chicago too. I want to keep an eye on like the Bulls have already taken 53s twice. And DeRozan is someone who I think raises your offensive floor quite a bit. I mean, this is even going back to his Toronto days. And also then maybe can help raise your defensive floor because you can put all these non-shooting defenders around him and, he'll still be able to like get you a good shot. That was sort of the formula for the Bulls when they've been at their best, however you want to call that, in the 3 years that he was there. But also, like, they're 18th in three-point attempt rate now. And you're not really going to get a ton on the fast break with DeRozan. And then your defense, like, you're probably not going to force many turnovers. Like, he's got to guard Julius Randle. I think he's improved a lot as a defender within his capabilities. But, like, he's guarding the 4 now.
Mm-hmm.
So you do kind of wonder, like Sabonis is off to a great start to the year. He's shooting a few more threes and making them. But that's only 11 attempts so far. So I do kind of wonder, and then at the end of games, like you kind of have to give it to DeRozan because DeRozan with Fox spacing for him is way better than Fox with DeRozan spacing for him.
Yeah.
So he does kind of DeRozanize the team. We'll see. He was going to shoot more threes. That's not happening. He's taking 1.7 for 36. I guess big surprise is age 35 season. He hasn't turned over a new leaf there.
How many foot on the line threes per game though?
Or heel on the line.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So I think this is a good team. They got good players. Like this, it feels like they're kind of right on track to be the team that I thought they were going to be. But I mean, at least the good thing is at least they blew out the bad teams. Like that gives
Golf
you
claps.
a nice floor. That they're not just like they have enough discipline, enough veterans that if they play terrible teams, like they can be effective against them, and that's useful. Like if you get into like kind of this track meet with those teams as well, and those are close, then you don't feel as good. But also, Utah might be really bad. Let's take just a couple of questions here. There's one that I wanted to get to. Let me see if I can find it. Oh yeah, this is a great comment here. Great show. There we go. All right, touch you. All right. Let's see here. There was one about a trade. Let me see if I can find that. Sorry about this great radio as I scroll up through these myriad comments here. Ah, yes. This is a good one from Miles Johnson. I wish I had gotten to this on the Clippers. What about Zach LaVine being traded to the Clippers? That actually kind of makes some sense to me.
Well, it makes sense because the Clippers, we've established that nobody's given the Bulls a draft pick for him.
Yeah.
So the Clippers.
So it's just getting the Bulls off the money.
Clippers can meet the price.
Especially if the Bulls are too good, which it's looking like that.
Yeah.
I want to dig into them a little bit more.
Yeah.
They've had a couple of pretty big wins. Granted, Memphis is without Ja, but their offense is actually looking way better. Like as I noted, they're getting up a lot of threes. So and LaVine does look good. And I think like he is for a team that doesn't have its draft pick. Like LaVine is just a perfect fit to just like give him a floor, give the fans the Intuit Dome something to cheer about.
Yeah.
And his fit next to Harden is like a little dicey, but Harden is only under contract for one more year. I imagine he'll want to stay there because he's So that could, and I guess what would the trade be though? What's the matching salary?
Well, it's like, PJ Tucker certainly, right? And then
yeah. It's PJ Tucker.
And then, do you want it to be Norm, or do you want it to be Man's tricky because of the extension? But he is still trade. Too bad, he is still trade eligible though, right? And then, but
I mean, Powell has to
maybe
be in it,
or does it kind of has Powell, probably the number's big enough that it probably has to be Powell, right?
Yeah. Now, if you're the Clippers, you might just be saying, "Well, I actually think Norman Powell's just as good as Levine." I don't know if I buy that, but
that you at least stop and hold a meeting about that topic, though, if you're the Clippers.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and the Bulls are not at a point where they're going to incentivize a team to take Levine really in any way.
No.
So, yeah, I mean, is that a trade? If you could trade Norm Powell, Terrence Mann, and PJ Tucker for Levine if you're the Clippers, would you do that? I might actually consider that.
I would think about it. I would be more bullish on it if I only had to part with one of Mann or Powell, and I could put
Mann isn't any good. He's like Chris Dunn has been better than him so far. Like maybe Mann shoots it a little bit better, but Mann is not a starter on the team.
Yeah, if I could do Tucker, Mann, I'm trying to think what they need to get there. There's apron issues, I think, if they take back more money also, but. If there was a way it's an intriguing thought. If you could do that deal and keep Norm in a 6-man role, I think you feel awesome about it. But I still think you have to look at that deal, even if Norm has to be in it.
Yeah, there's just no way to make the salary match unless you're going to put in Zubats.
Can't do that.
No, Zubats he's their second best player. He's been awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Brian knows this. Like Dunn has been awesome to watch so far. I mean, he was an absolute wrecking ball defensively in that Warriors win. Just kept showing up in the passing lanes, kept shooting the gap and getting steals and all the off-ball screening action that they wanted to watch. Yeah, he was a monster. All right, let's pack it in here. This was fun. Thanks so much for joining us here on YouTube. And of course, I want to remind you all that you can subscribe to Dunked on Prime. You can get every Hollinger and Duncan. You can get every pod with me and Danny Leroux, access to our cap sheets, which are very useful for trying to figure out who you can trade Zach LaVine for. I just looked at him right now, in fact. And you also get Dan Feldman's Daily Dunks as well, which is a daily email breaking down all just the regular news throughout the day. So lots of great stuff on Dunked on Prime. And we are offering 35% off a yearly membership with the code preseason24. That's code preseason24. Link to that will be in the show notes, or you can just Google Dunked on Prime and find it very easily. Again, that's preseason 24. Hope to see you in our community.